right? The same psychological operations that the mainstream media is pulling to try to undermine Donald Trump, the only anti-establishment candidate I'm pretty sure we've had. Like, that's literally been it. And he's president now, and they're coming after him. And we talked about this Monday night at length about how the mainstream media pollsters sort of sat back and watched and put out a couple of moderately okay Trump polls, and then all of a sudden coordinated last weekend to try to dump his approval rating for his 100-day mark. Really petty stuff if you think about it, because our beloved neighbors to the north have a lot more crazy stuff going on. And that's the topic of today's discussion. We're actually going to cover all things Canada. We're going to talk about how Trump interfered, whatever you want to call it. We're going to get reaction from a conservative leader in Canada about exactly what happened in the election and where that leaves Canada and the future of their conservative movement. And then we're going to talk about secession. It's a topic we've discussed a lot from an America perspective, but it looks a lot more likely, let's just put it that way, a lot more likely to happen sooner rather than later up north. And so I'm going to bring her on right now. We've met her before. I think it was February. It seemed like a million years ago. We were talking about this election that just happened. I think it was April 28th, as if it was in the distant future. But now the future has arrived and it's wild. So welcome, Nadine Ness. Let me make us bigger. Thanks for coming back. Everybody really loved your show, and we appreciate you joining us again.
Thanks so much for having me. We didn't know then how it was going to turn out, but things took a turn for the worse.
Well, I wanted to start with this just to give everybody an idea of what we're working with now. A lot of people might not know on the American side what happened, but this is how the American media is covering it right now. Canada was poised to elect its own Maple MAGA movement, and then Trump happened. Now, maybe it's Americans and it's always about us, but some Canadian conservatives told NBC News, and if you don't know, NBC's one of the bad eggs in the United States. They voted for liberals for the first time in Monday's election in a rejection of Pierre Poilievre's seemingly Trump-inspired campaign. I mean, we're not going to read all this drivel, but before this week's federal election in Canada, Derek Ouellette, I guess, I don't know, I'm not a French person, and his wife, Yesenia, could never have imagined voting for anyone but a conservative. We both raised conservative, and we both kind of thought conservative is just what you do. A 46-year-old insurance broker from Belle River near Ontario said in a phone interview late Tuesday, he was proud to have done the once unthinkable thing, however, voting for Liberal leader and Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is projected to have secured a minority victory in this week's poll. All right, I want to get your reaction. What do you say to that?
Did the article say at the beginning for the first time voting Liberal? Are they talking about him or just the country?
Oh, they went out and they said, let's find a conservative in Ontario who's never voted Liberal, and then put them front and center in the article, because for the very first time, Mark Carney was the one to do it. That's, one of the tactics they do.
You know what's funny? The Liberals have a tendency to do this, and I'm sure you see this in American politics as well with the Democrats. They run an election based on fear. They did it during COVID, and that's why the Liberals got in. And they did it again this time. But this time, the threat, the enemy was Donald Trump was going to come and take Canada. Therefore, you can't elect anyone who has any political leaning the same as Donald Trump. So that's what media pushed everywhere, that Pierre Poilievre was just like Donald Trump. And in fact, I don't think he was. But I wish he had been a little bit more sympathetic or less talking like a liberal when it came to the tariff war and stuff. He basically attacked Trump at every opportunity as he could. And it really didn't look much different than Mark Carney. But the fact that he was a conservative, they just made that link automatically. Well, the general public did, but it was also pushed by the mainstream media nonstop. They've been doing that for several several election cycle with the conservatives.
Yeah. So, like in general, how do they treat Pierre? The big mainstream ones.
The
Is it
media?
with
Oh,
as
oh, it's
much revulsion as Trump?
yeah, yeah. It's very similar. Pierre has held his own though with the media. He's been kind of pushing back when they do. I don't know if you saw the video of the apple eating.
Oh, I think all of America saw that video. That's the only thing they know about Pierre, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
It
where
was
they're
good.
trying to link him to Trump and saying you took a page of Trump's book, and he's like, "What page? Like what book?" And but that's what they've been doing nonstop, and it's kind of funny because that's literally what's been cemented in the brains of Canadians. So it's a little bit different in Canada. Like I've said this before, in the mainstream media, we don't have really alternative mainstream media. You guys have Fox News in the mainstream media, but in Canada, we don't. We have alternative media, which are crowd-funded media, like True North, which is now called Juno News, Rebel News, and a few Western Standard, a few of those, but we
Hmm.
don't have one on TV. So if you look at the polling data as to who voted Liberal, everyone 55 and below were voting Conservatives. It's all the boomers that were voting more predominantly Liberals, while they're all the ones who aren't on social media, who don't get the counter narrative, so that watch
Yeah.
the news every day and believe everything that's on TV. So I think I think because of that, there's been a huge problem that we're going to keep seeing in future election if the conservatives don't figure out a way to break through and reach those people with their message, because they weren't reaching them. The media weren't reporting accurately. They weren't reporting the platforms properly. I think the only glimpse of it we might have seen is during the debate. But even then, how many people will sit down and watch the debate in Canada?
Yeah.
The political people will, but the middle ground people probably won't spend that much time.
So it feels like, in some of these situations, Canada is trailing the US, and others, it's leading the US. And in this, I think it's kind of leading us because we've had an age reversal as well. And this is something that Rasmussen's been following really closely, where 10 years ago, 65 and older were overwhelmingly conservative, but that's when it was more of an establishment neocon party,
Mhm,
uh, a very presidential reach across the aisle. Let's work together on immigration reform and Social Security, that kind of thing, right?
mhm,
And that has changed very rapidly just during Biden. I think it was kicked off a lot because of COVID, and where for the first time 18 to 39-year-olds are more conservative and the 65 and older are less so, but it's not by a lot. Like they're actually still pretty close together compared to some of the polling I've seen out of Canada, which there was one snippet, I don't remember who it was from, that the one that everybody saw was that boomers were essentially overwhelmingly voting to stop Trump, and everybody under like 30 was like, I can't afford to live.
well, you gotta understand the economic situation that we're in Canada. The immigration, see, you guys have had an illegal immigration problem. We have a legal immigration problem where they just allowing all of these immigrants to come in legally, and it's created a housing shortage. We've also had ridiculous amounts of spending by government, the most amount of spending that we've had since the Liberal been in power than all of history, and it's caused rabid inflation in Canada. So the boomers profited from that because all of their homes have gone up way up in value. They're the ones who have kind of built up a lot of material things that are now worth more. And then you have the young people who can't afford a home. Like the majority of the young people won't be able to afford a home in Canada. So they're feeling this almost this what's the word opposite of hope? What's the opposite word of hope?
Depression, uh,
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think of the word. I just can't think about it right now.
despair.
Despair. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're feeling despair that they're never going to be able to own a home. Like all their dreams are kind of crushed. And you're seeing that in the young generation. And they were looking to Pierre, and that was his message, like a message of hope, versus Mark Carney's message was a message of fear. You must fear Trump. And the other weird thing is that worked, which I'm shocked, is they painted all of the problems in Canada as Trump's fault because of the tariffs. So all the economic failures that they've done over the last 10 years that have put us in this situation, the narrative that they kept pushing over and over, this is because of the tariffs and it's all Trump's fault. And the thing is, so many of them are so uninformed that they just take this in and believe it. And you can even see it in the narratives that are online right now. So it's going to keep happening. Look, I also want to say not all boomers voted liberals. There's a lot of out there that really want their grandchildren's, their children to have a better future than they had, and those voted conservatives. So I don't want to discount all of those, but the majority of the voting was the boomers that
Yep.
went liberal.
Our audience is sophisticated enough to know that when we generalize here, we're not attacking people personally, so that's not a problem. The parallels are very similar, and what you pointed out, I think, is profound. It all comes down to legal versus illegal immigration, but we had the same situation here. We had predominantly boomer politicians decide that the absolute worst thing for our country is deflation, and that they can't have population collapse. And so they imported a lot of people in a very great replacement style thing. And of course, it was all illegal and it brought all these problems. And it also brought inflation. And our young people have a similar level of despair. What's weird, though, like we ask questions, will today's children be better off than their parents? Only 22% say yes in America, which is really bad for America. Like, it shouldn't be that low.
Mhm.
But the 18 to 39-year-olds are actually more optimistic than the boomers. They're like 35%. The boomers, it's like 17%. But then the boomers are more left-leaning, although I don't think as left-leaning as you guys. But it's like, yeah, they bring in people so that there's somebody to support their, end life government sponsored like retirements. And the side effect is that, oh, by the way, all the young people can't afford to live. Now, let me ask you, bringing it back to Pierre. I've seen a lot of good talk from him. I've seen a lot about like stances of hope and common sense. What did he have a very firm platform on what his plans were, for instance, on immigration? Did he actually put stuff out?
He did do some. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. He reduced the amount. I think the number he had was 250,000 a year. I think that he would cap it at that so that it wouldn't go faster than the amount of houses we can build. So I'd have to go back and look because I don't want to speak out of line, but this is just what's in the back of my mind. It wasn't as aggressive as I think I would want to see it because right now, any that comes in, we have so much right now, it hurts us. So, but if you contrast that to Mark Carney, he just announced, and this is a perfect glimpse of how uninformed and like a lot of Canadians are when it comes to policy and things that are announced. They just don't stop for a second and think critically about it. And one of them, he announced that he's going to do us all a favor and cap immigration at 5% of our population. So just
Oh, no.
and everyone who hears this, great, he's doing something about immigration. He's capping it, he's stopping it. But 5% of our population is over 2 million people a year. That's worse than what we've had
Yeah.
over the last few years.
I
So
just
he's
asked
not
Grok, and Grok says it's 1.7%.
it's
You know what I mean?
it's
That's crazy.
so it's over 2 million, which is like 5% of our current population. So when you think about that announcement, Canadians should be outraged. We only build about 250,000 houses a year, and he wants to bring 2 million. So I don't foresee things getting better at all. In fact, I think it's going to get way worse. I think you're about to see the collapse of Canada. And
Well, I wanna hold on that a little bit and talk about that in our next segment. I'm not too bullish about the future of Canada too. How do you, I haven't really compared this, but I think probably a lot of the problem here is that you're a little bit farther down the demographic collapse. Is that correct? You're a more aging population in general than America?
I don't know. I wish I
Yeah.
knew that number, but I don't know the number.
I'll have to ask Rock
It's
because I mean, I think it would make sense. You know, everybody likes to refer to the quote, and I forget where it's from, but the idea that a republic falls once half of a population can vote itself. Give me that's right. And they
mhm,
always, you know, I think it was I think it was like from the 80s or 90s Republican Newt Gingrich era that I think it was popularized. They talked about that a lot in America when they were talking about reforming welfare. So the idea being, well, giving all the poor people all of this money is the problem because they're just going to vote for the party that buys them off
mhm,
essentially. And it turns out that no, the problem is corporations and old people, not the poor folks. It's the people with massive 401ks and nest eggs that are,
mhm.
you know, living off of social security and all this other stuff, right? And so that's what I think. Now I want to ask you specifically about Polyev. What do you think? Well, let me put this up. I mean, just so people don't have the context, maybe this is your version of what we have over here, 538. Actually, this is probably more like Real Clear Politics. They're not
Mhm.
actually, this is just the polls. It's not like a statistical model. And the blue is your conservatives. And I'm assuming what happened here is that Trudeau started to get really unpopular
Mhm.
and the LPC was collapsing. And then Trudeau resigns right here. And this is like one of the biggest swings I think I've seen in politics.
I
Pierre
wanna show you
Poilievre's
something.
party. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna show you something. Look at the orange. So, in Canada, it's not a two-party system, we have several of them. The orange is the NDP. So, the NDP is left-leaning, and they used to have I can't remember the exact number of seats, I can look it up, but I think it was at one point, they had, like, 40 seats. And the last results that I saw, it might have been 8 seats that they got this election. So not only did the Conservatives come down a bit, the NDP completely collapsed and joined the LPC, so the Liberals. So not only did the Conservatives come down a little bit, the NDP imploded, and most of the NDP joined in with the Liberals to defeat the Conservatives.
Is what kind of signaling do you think caused that? Because that's like, and again, our third parties are not real things. They're just not, especially in the political context America is at. And we've had some spoilers run, like Ross Perot run as an independent. Um, but our libertarians pull like 2-3% max, just horrifyingly bad. But that would be like all of a sudden, like we're talking about 20% of your voting population who identifies with the party changing their mind and saying, no, I'm now something else. And in my opinion, that stuff doesn't happen this rapidly organically. So was it like, why? Why did it happen?
Like, are you talking about the NDP stop voting NDP
Yeah,
and
this, I
going
mean, they
liberal?
go from like they literally were at 20% in
Yeah.
January down to
Well,
9%.
I think it's several factors. So NDP had been propping up Trudeau all of all of this time. So Trudeau was kept in power because the NDP formed a coalition with them. So the NDP was kind of seen as the same people who were not voting liberal were kind of seen as propping up the NDP was seen as propping up the liberals. So as soon as Trudeau fell, the NDP were kind of not separated really from Trudeau. So, and then there was this big,
Yeah.
massive threat that people needed to come up against, and we needed to fight back. And the media kind of pushed the Liberals as the only one capable of doing that. And then all the NDP went, well, we can't vote NDP, let's go Liberal. So at least it's not a conservative that's going to come in and
Got it.
give Trump Canada. And I'm not saying that's the reality. I'm just saying that's what a lot of people believed. So when they say that Trump changed the election, he did. And you got to understand in Canada the level of TDS that Canadians have. And I say this as a former TDS voter. I'm a former lefty who absolutely used to hate Trump. So I was totally brainwashed to think that he was the Antichrist and all of that. like so many
Many
Canadians.
such
And
cases. It's okay. It's okay.
yeah, yeah.
Everybody has their
And
path.
I'm saying that I don't believe that anymore because I started looking into the basically how they twist things on him. I'm like, he didn't even say that when I would go and actually look. But the majority of Canadians still fully brainwashed to absolutely think that that orange man bad and TDS is like leading them to think that basically he's going to come and take over Canada with arms and there's going to be like a world war between Canada and the US. And so if you're going voting with that in your mind, you're and Trump didn't help the situation. If we're honest, he didn't help it. He egged it on. He kept saying 50 first date and things like that. So I laugh because I could see through it. I know what he's doing. He's trying to weaken Canada so the negotiation, when it comes to the tariffs, when they come to the table, he'll be in a stronger position. If you read his book, if you see how he's operated, this is just how Trump does. But the majority of Canadians don't really know all of that. And the media painted him as, oh, yeah, he's a direct threat to
It's art of the
Canada.
deal.
So
Art of
what?
the deal. Art of the deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now what I'm realizing looking at this stunning reversal is that a lot of it probably has more to do with Trudeau than actually Trump. And Trump was potentially a foil, right? But it's like, it seems like NDP people were voting to support Trudeau, but didn't want to vote for his party. Once he's out of the picture, everything reverses. And oh, by the way, I mean, it's like a week before Trump's inauguration, and Trump came out of the gate really strong with the 51st
Mhm.
state stuff.
And you got to understand too. So just to give a picture, the Trudeau was like the image of the Liberal Party, but all the cabinet members stayed the same. Like Carney basically came in and kept the entire same team. It's the same party. He kept the same platforms, except one might have been like carbon tax, and they're like, "Oh, he's removing the carbon tax, so maybe he's not like Trudeau." And it kind of fooled people. And remember when Biden was booted out and Kamala was chosen as the de facto leader, she kind of went up in the poll because it's new, it's fresh, it's exciting. While our election was while he's Mark Carney's going up in the poll, nobody really got a chance to get to know him before they voted.
Yeah.
And he comes like I'll give him credit. He comes across as cool, calm, collected, like level-headed. I'm not saying that's what he is, but that's the perception that he put out during the campaign for to a certain extent. So people kind of look to him almost like a Harper in a way. Harper was our last prime minister before Trudeau, and he was like very, very calm, very monotone, very level. And in contrast, if they hate Donald Trump, they don't want a Donald Trump type. And then Pierre Poilievre was very much like, I'm going to talk how I speak. I'm going to go back and forth with the media. And I'm not saying he was necessarily a Donald Trump type, but he was a bulldog. And I think that was another aspect into it. Do we want a bulldog against a bulldog, or do we want someone who's cool, calm, and collected? I do believe Pierre would have been better at dealing with defending Canada than Mark Carney. In fact, if you saw what happened this last week, Mark Carney was very weak. He didn't push back at all. I think even liberals are defending and say, well, that's what you need to do, but that's not what he promised he was going to do. That's not, it's so insane just seeing how they're defending his behavior. And not once did he say, hey, um, like not once did he really stand for Canada. So, but that's another story altogether.
Well, I haven't had the ability to like follow everything Pierre said or put out. And people have asked me about Canada. And my take on it is that he didn't do what Trump did to build
Mhm.
the right movement for Canada. And Trump is who he is. but he put together a very good platform that is what the majority of Americans wanted. And so when Pierre got on the stage and, like you said, did the exact same stuff Carney did, it didn't seem like there was a very strong underlying strategy, let's just say. And what Trump would have done in Pierre's situation was probably fly to America, be seen meeting with Trump, and come
Mhm.
back and say, "Well, I handled this guy.
Mhm.
I'm the person that doesn't just virtue signal. I'm the person that goes and negotiates on the world stage with a superpower and works it out." And the fact that he didn't do that seemed like a
No.
really missed opportunity. But like you're saying, like, stuff that it doesn't seem like. I mean, people know what MAGA is, like, especially back in
Mhm.
2016. It's like, yeah, we're going to build a wall. We're going to go
Mhm.
after China. That's what it was. We're going to drain the swamp. And it's like, what were Pierre's big three?
The
Like,
economy, that's the biggest thing he was talking about, the economy. Um, he didn't really focus much on immigration. He focused a lot
yeah,
on the trade. But you gotta understand too, in Canada, when the polling was happening, the thing at the top of people's concern, the majority of Canadians, were the tariffs, the Trump-Canadian relationship. So he focused on the top 3 for the most part. I'm trying to remember what the
yeah.
3rd one is. I should have refreshed on
Well,
this, but
like you say, economy. That's like, from a public opinion perception, people are always going to say the economy is the number one issue. But like, a politician can't just go economy, economy, economy. Like, it has to be like, no, we're going to go do this, because people. And like, again, you guys are more trusting, but in America, I think they got sick of people like our prior salient Republican candidate was Mitt Romney, and he talked just like every other politician. And I think people started to realize, well, that means nothing's going to happen. And that's why Trump clicked
Mhm,
all of a sudden. And they're like, oh, this guy might actually do something. And even if he doesn't, maybe he burns the whole system down. And
mhm.
that's what it took for America. I'm not saying that's what it'll take from Canada, but Pierre didn't go through the process, in my outward looking opinion, of determining what Canada needs.
Yeah, I think, and I'm just gonna share my opinion, leave it or take it or leave it, but and some in Canada will probably disagree. I think conservatives of Canada for the last, gosh, 10 years, it's almost like they're following the advice of how politics used to run in Canada. And they're not moving ahead with the times. They're not recognizing that we're dealing with a very different situation. But I will give Pierre this. His social media game was top notch compared to other conservatives in the past, was really great. He did rallies and we had massive numbers attend rallies similar to Trump. In fact, media was kind of saying that, oh, it's like MAGA rallies, right? Comparing it to Trump. Now, one of the things he didn't do, and this is a discussion a lot with Joe Rogan this week, because he said we asked Pierre if he would come and he wouldn't come. He didn't go on a whole bunch of podcasts. I think the last week he may have done a couple in
Mm,
Canada, Jasmine Lane being one of them, who's phenomenal. And then another podcast that kind of no one really had heard of, just a brand new person. So he didn't take advantage of going on platforms where maybe, and even Joe Rogan, they would have, this is, and I tweeted about this. He should have done this. He should have said ahead of time, hey, I'm going to Joe Rogan. These are the reasons why I'm going there. And the media would have talked about it constantly. Canadians would have gotten curious. They probably would have watched it. Millions of Canadians would have probably shared some of the little clips of the Joe
yeah.
Rogan. It would have been unscripted, really great. And not to do it for Joe Rogan or for the Americans, but to give us material and content that we can share with other people so that young people can say, hey, I think you send it to their grandparents. Say, I think you should watch this clip. And he didn't. And I think that personally, I think that was bad advice. I know the Canadians
Yeah.
feel differently. I don't necessarily think he should have been going to all of the American podcasts, but even if he had gone on some and said, "Hey, we're going to try to build relationship between Americans too, and talk about the tariff," try because We have a premier who's done that in Alberta, Danielle Smith. I don't know if you've heard about her. She's been
No.
phenomenal. She even went on Ben Shapiro and say how good Canadian oil and gas is for Americans, because Americans buy a lot of our raw
Yeah.
product, refinish it, and sell it back to us. And they sell it to other countries. So, and at a discount. So there's so many things he could have done, but it's the
You tell
boomers.
me he turned down Rogan, and that we all know what that means over here. And I don't like a lot of Canadians might not appreciate how big Joe Rogan is, but the amount of reach that you get out of Joe Rogan interview could be over 100 million people. It's just absolutely incredible. And
Mhm,
so if you had the opportunity to do Rogan, you do Rogan. And
mhm.
we've had recent history understanding that people who have chosen not to do Joe Rogan usually have something to hide because Kamala Harris couldn't make it work. And her internal
Mhm.
campaign polling showed that she was going to lose. And a week before the election, they couldn't get her on Rogan, and it's because she wanted all these rules about what they could go. They wanted like editing rights. They wanted a list of topics they can't discuss, and that's just not what he is.
No, no. Yeah, I don't know. And again, people will say, well, they're already trying to point him or make him look like Trump. But again, if he had said ahead of time, this is why I'm going, and set the script and the stage for why, he could have been ahead of the media. He could have defined himself, and media would have had no choice to report about it. They would have been reporting about it. But when you define, and this is a failure a lot of conservatives do in Canada, they don't like talking to the press because they know it's usually going to be twisted and negative, and they don't really define themselves with the public.
Yeah.
So, and we learn this as well as an organization. We're going to talk about what we're going through right now and how we're trying to change that. But if conservatives don't define themselves in the public square with the media will do it for them. And we already know that's going to be negative. So they need to start getting ahead of the media. If there's like a scandal breaking or a story breaking, or they're going to talk about something, they should issue a press release right away with quotes that the media has to use. A lot of people don't realize that media have a duty to report both sides. So when they don't get, and they're not going to do a lot of efforts into getting the conservative side. So when they don't get both sides, they're going to paint the narrative with whatever they get. So that might be like people on the left saying things like that article you shared earlier, where they found the one conservative voter that voted this time liberal. Like they'll paint a narrative, right? But if
Yep.
the conservatives provide them the information, the quotes, the story, they have no choice to use that in their story, or else they can be held liable for not doing balanced reporting. And I'm not saying they're going to fully listen, but we did that this week. We're like, we're going to get ahead. They're going to be attacking us. We're going to get ahead and paint our own narrative, and we're not going to let them define us. We're going to define ourselves. And until conservatives in Canada learn that, they're going to keep losing with mainstream media. They're going to keep losing with the boomers.
What I've been saying, and what Trump is incredible about, he was very very prescient in many ways, and I think it's an unattainable goal to say that, well, Pierre Poilievre should have been Trump. But what I think he really needs to do is be a leader. And Trump
Mhm.
did that along with other things. Trump went through a branding exercise of saying, what does our country need to be fixed? What are the achievable things that I can campaign on to say that I'm going to fix? And then how can I build a coalition and get my message to the people? And Trump, I think, acknowledged it very early. I mean, he was using very fake news and fake news, like calling them out to their face, but using guerrilla tactics, because I very much think, and maybe different countries, different levels, that we're in an information war right now.
Mhm.
Basically, World War III is an information war, and you can't let you have to figure out a way around the information gatekeepers. And what Trump was doing was using like putting funny stuff out so memes could spread his message. And he was actually playing like dirty tricks on the mainstream media too, Like, we had this whole thing where Trump used to say that Barack Obama's birth certificate was inauthentic, and he maybe had some points in his favor about that. But he had a big press conference where he said he was going to make a statement about Barack Obama's birth certificate, and all of the media showed up with all their cameras, and it was a rug pull. Instead, he had like 10 admirals there, admirals and generals, who were there to endorse him. And he said, "Oh yeah, the certificate's real, but like, let's talk to these admirals." It was beautiful. And it's like, that's what it takes to
Yeah.
overcome these things. And he was doing that 10 years ago. And it's like,
Yeah.
if Pierre doesn't even have, we need to do ABC, and A isn't immediately stop this flood of immigration, then
Mhm.
like, how do you fix it? I don't think you can. And B isn't, we have to figure out how to work with Trump. Like, complete miss.
Yeah. It I don't know. To be honest, like I was invited to like the watch party or the victory party of the conservatives here in Saskatoon, and I was on my way there, and you're kind of getting results as you're getting there. By the time the ballots close here in Canada, basically the like in Saskatchewan, the election is decided. And I just sat there and I was thinking, well, maybe there's like still hope. And as the night went by, I'm like, okay, Canada's fallen. If Canadians after the last 10 years can still vote for the same government that destroyed us for the last 10 years, I don't think there's hope in Canadians anymore. The next election is just going to be another thing that going to come up with that's going to push fear, and Canadians are going to be so brainwashed into voting the exact same way. And I remember tweeting, "It's official, I'm a separatist." I have a lot of hope in Canada fixing itself to the point where we can be a prosperous country again. So
Yeah.
that may lead into the next.
Yeah, we'll go there in a second. I think you're right.
Yeah.
The pendulum swings farther sometimes, and it's like sometimes fewer people push back stronger, or sometimes it has to go all the way out and just come back by itself. You know, the
Mhm.
pendulum swings. And we're pushing back on the pendulum here right now, and you guys had a chance, but maybe it'll work out for you in the future. Um, but man, like, what I like, let me ask you this too before we go again. We have a really great topic queued up. Uh, are there people currently, first off, does Pierre have a future? And are there number 2, 3, and 4 waiting in the wings that have potential to be a nationwide leader for Canadian conservatives?
Um, I'm gonna piss off some people with this.
Oh, we love it. Bring it.
I'm gonna say 2 things. The first thing is not what's gonna piss off people. Pierre Poilievre, he still won more votes than any conservative in history, even though we didn't win. Like, normally, this would have won us the election, a majority government, but because the NDP imploded into the Liberals, we didn't. So when you look at the actual data as to how well they actually did phenomenally compared to before. Again, the NDP is kind of what skewed this. Do I think there's going to be another leader that will be better? Not right now. I think he's our best chance, and hopefully people will start seeing how extreme Mark Carney is. So I don't think he should step down for us to choose a different leader that's going to try to go more woke and then end up bringing Canada more left, because we've had that the last two leadership. We had Erin O'Toole, which was literally like a liberal in blue. Our blue is conservative. It's the opposite of you
Yeah.
guys. So I don't think he should step down. Now, are there other leaders that would be good? I'm sure you've seen recently in American news, you had Maxime Bernier go and do some interviews with some of the people. And this is where I'm going to piss off people. I don't think he's a leader either. Just seeing how he's operated the party that he leads, which is the People's Party of Canada, the PPC. and just seeing the rhetoric that's come out of that group, and he doesn't lead them. They've become so even awful, like really awful to deal with, even just online and stuff. That's where you'll see like the very racist stuff, the very anti-Semitic stuff will come from kind of that group. So I don't think Maxime Bernier is a leader that could run for the Conservative Party and fix this. I think right now Pierre's our best bet. I wish we
Yeah.
had like a Ronald Reagan type. I really do, but we don't. So,
Ronald Reagan was the right person for the right time in America. And I think that Trump is the right person for the right
yes.
time now. And Ronald Reagan is not what we need or needed. And I wonder, like, maybe he should go on Rogan, because you'll find out really quick. And you never know, like, it's movements have their louder elements, and certainly the Trump movement has those people here as well, but they're a minority, and the mainstream media is always going to pick on the minority and say, look, this represents the people. And what drowns those out is a strong mission and
Mhm.
cohesion in the movement. And so it is a leadership challenge, I guess. So
Yeah,
maybe he can succeed.
I don't think Maxime would fit that role at all. Some people do, like the hardcore PPC. Uh, he's not a really liked person, and just to understand too, the PPC is not even run democratically. It's like a corporation. Like the membership don't even decide who's the leader and stuff. So there's a lot of things that I think kind of plays into it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe there'll be some kind of come out of. I think what we do need though will be like a Ronald Reagan with a little bit more of a Trump um, guts. I think that's what we need. I don't think we need necessarily a Trump. I don't think Canadians would be willing at this point to vote for a Trump. Maybe. I don't know. But
Well, I mean, like, again, you just got to figure out what Trump looks like for you.
we need a
And it's a
Daniel
person
Smith,
that's
actually.
basically fearless and aggressive, right?
Yeah.
And has a very clear vision. I mean, like, I'm looking at Bernier right now, and he's retweeting stuff that makes sense. And endless population growth from mass immigration is eroding the Canadian quality of life. That's probably a good statement. Is that appealing?
Mm.
Is this resonating with people?
Well, you got to understand, like, well, and yeah, someone said in the comments, Max Bernier's PPC only received 141,000 votes. So he's a Quebecer. He comes from like an
Yeah,
elitist family, and there's a lot of things that I think are
that's loaded. Yeah.
negate. Yeah, that kind of brings that into the picture. Who actually, like while we were talking, I know who would be great. Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta. If she was to run for the Conservative Party, she's a mixture of Donald Trump's guts, but she's so diplomatic, eloquent, and compassionate in her message. But I don't know
That's
if she
probably
would do
right.
it.
Good. She should be on
Yeah.
Rogan. Get on Rogan and
Yeah.
explain what's going wrong. How, because that's, again, like that Apple video. I think America helped that become very viral. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, it looked like it helped Pierre more than he deserved. And maybe she gets on Rogan, she makes her case about how Canada can work with America, what the future for Canada looks like, how the problems can be solved. I mean, how clippable and viral are all the opportunities there?
Mhm.
She could
Yeah,
look
I
like a
think she should.
genius.
If you know Joe, I think you should call him and say, "Get
I don't
Danielle
know.
Smith on."
No,
Okay.
man. Joe
But
Rogan, if you're listening to this, you need to have Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta, on your show. Like, yeah, I gotta
she
follow her
would
though.
she would be she's been so good. She did a speech this week about the separation and stuff, and it was epic. It was so good. And she's really quick on her feet. She's really good in interviews, and she knows her stuff. Like she'll start talking about like the stats and stuff just off the tip of her is it the tip of the tongue or top of the
Yeah.
head? Whatever the expression is. My first language is French, so if sometimes I say weird structures, it's because English is my second language.
You're
So
doing great. Doing great. Okay, let's
Yeah.
get in the next time. That's cool though. I now I have something that I can pound on the drum about how Canada needs to fix itself. Let me check
And
if anybody's. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to add, and Pierre could potentially do it, but I don't think it's because Pierre's personality is not right or that he's not capable. I do think he has the capability of being the best prime minister Canada has ever had. The problem is I think he's not listening to the right people. If he followed his own gut instinct, I think he would be key. I think he needs to be more confirmed in his own like values. If you look, I'll just say one thing quickly. When he was still in college, before he became a politician, he did an essay called If I Was Prime Minister. And this was 20 some years ago. If you go and read, or 30, whatever, how long ago, if you go and read it, this is still who he is today. If he was to follow that advice and use that for his campaign going forward and actually stay to his core values, I do believe he could be the best thing that ever happened to Canada. The problem is, like I said, they're surrounded by the old school conservatives that just think, well, we can't do that or you won't win. So
That's our problem. That is absolutely our problem.
you guys have the same thing too.
Well, this is a very close analog to what happened to Ron DeSantis,
Hmm.
taking advice from the wrong people, not having sort of the again, like being an executive of a province or a state is a very different job than campaigning for a national office and leading a movement. And some
Hmm.
people don't have both. And quite frankly, if you had to pick one, I would pick being able to lead a public movement because you can surround yourself by people with executive capabilities.
Hmm.
And it's like that used to be fine 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it's not now. There's so much misinformation and so many tough problems to solve, I think.
I want to say one more failure of the conservatives, and I hope some of them send this to Pierre's team. You guys have a lot of conservative movements in the US, and the conservatives in the US embrace those movements, work with them. In Canada, conservatives tried to distance themselves from any conservative movement because they don't want linked by association or linked by, and they because of that, conservative movements don't really take ground. We don't have a Turning Point USA. The only thing we really had other than our organization was the Canada Strong and Free Network, which is one conference that happens once a year in Ottawa and then once in Alberta. And that's basically it. So,
Yeah.
because anytime they start growing, conservatives distance themselves and it becomes nothing. So, I think if they're going to want to win and have a big team helping them, they need to start embracing these movements and stop legit, legitimizing the attacks the media has on these movements.
I'm,
Because if
I'm,
they
I'm
keep doing
watching
that,
I'm watching chat waiting for them to correct you because we have the exact same thing. We
you
have,
do?
oh, yeah, 100%. We have good grassroots movements. You know, the Tea Party and then MAGA popped up, and then we had Walk Away, we have Turning Point, we have those
I've
things.
seen
But the
politicians jump with them.
well, the formal Republican leadership apparatus and all of the money is still very hostile to those people and is waiting, counting every second until Trump leaves so they can get back to business as usual. And that,
Really?
yeah, the reason we're in this situation is because the Trump movement was strong enough to overcome that. And there's been very little, like people talk about Trump making executive orders and then having Congress codify it into law. Well, the same thing has happened in the Republican Party, that the movement exists and has not been codified into law by actually replacing legislators with people who believe in the movement. It hasn't really happened. I mean, there are a couple of leaders, but in general, our federal politicians in Washington, D.C. are very much not aligned with MAGA at all.
Well,
Maybe 10 of them.
I kind of witnessed that even like with try not to shoot myself in the foot here, but we were trying to work with an organization and I won't name names because I still think they're great. but to do some training, we had a ton of candidates run for office here in Saskatchewan. We wanted to get them trained on how to campaign, how to do messaging and stuff. And they refused to come. They said we were too MAGA. And I'm like, at this point, we weren't even tweeting anything about Trump or MAGA or anything at all. So I witnessed that, like, even within dealing with some of the American organizations there, that there is clearly some that really don't. But then at the same time, I've been to America Fest and I saw like like all of the big names that are now part of Trump's administration were there speaking at America Fest. That's where you and I met.
Oh
And
yeah,
same
yeah.
thing with
No,
CPAC.
100%. No, I agree. It's a strong movement. I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
like, if you look at your average elected Republican at a state or Washington, D.C. level, they run establishment candidates. They want to run as moderates. They distance themselves from the Trump platform. They funnel a lot of money that comes from the top down to friends
Mhm.
and consultant class people that are interested, in my opinion, more about making money than about implementing new policies. And none of these leadership structures have really been fundamentally changed. And so I think that once Trump's no longer on the ballot, the Republicans are going to have a really hard time in America. So it really comes down to, there's a very short, 3.5 year time limit now, less than that probably, because they're going to try and figure out a way to win the 2026, take control of the House. So I don't know. We'll see how it works or not. But again, the people love MAGA.
Mhm.
Politicians do not at all.
No. Yeah,
All right, I want to. Okay,
okay, go
go
ahead.
ahead. You
Go
talk.
ahead.
I'm going to look at chat quick. Okay, sorry.
There's quite a few comments. I
What?
think we probably will see the same thing here in Canada, but Trump won because he embraced all those groups. Like, if you look at the wall, Scott Pressler, I know he has a movement. He won Pennsylvania for Trump because Trump embraced that movement to try to help them. Same with
You know.
look at Tucker Carlson's tour that was all over the US.
So yeah, you're like, I'm interviewing people and asking about what happened in these states and talking to grassroots volunteers and going through a learning process. I'm a few months ahead of you, and there's a lot of debate, let's just say, in America about who's taking credit for what. And I think my opinion is that there's an army of grassroots volunteers that a lot of people are sort of taking credit for, that are those people are not well funded. And Twitter, let's just say, does not reflect real life. And so
No.
that there are people that have been ascended to hero status that aren't doing as much as they say they are. That's playing out right now. And I don't want to
Mhm.
take sides in that debate.
I didn't even know
Um,
that was happening.
yeah. But ultimately, all of the money, the Koch money, the Heritage money, the Club for Growth money, blah, blah, blah. They wanted a DeSantis type and not a Trump type. And that's because I think the implications were where they felt that it was more controllable. So here's a question from James Honey. When is the earliest possibility of replacing Carney?
Well, it's a lot earlier. Well, okay, I'm going to pause this. We don't know yet what the final election result is. Right now, they have a minority government, but there's still they're still counting, recounts happening. And surprisingly, because they're canceling a bunch of ballots, a lot of seats that went conservatives are now going liberal. So there's a possibility, potentially, they could have a majority government. I'm hoping it's not going to be enough to do that. But if that's the case, then it's at least 4 years. It's like 4 years from now. Now, if they still hold minority government, it can still be another 4 years if the NDP, which have a few seats, or the Bloc Québécois, which is a party that's just for Quebec's separatism and stuff, or if some conservative vote along with them, but they're really shy of a few seats. So if they were to all push back, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Conservative, it could be sooner. I was trying to see what the minimum would be that I'm just looking here to see if they have to be in government for a minimum amount of time, and that I don't know the answer.
Let me
So right now they have 169 seats. They're 3 short of 172. Our system is different than the Americans. The person who gets the most vote is not necessarily the leader of the country. Like, it's whoever gets the most party seats becomes the leader of the country.
let
So
me bring this up quick. Stumbo, thank you. Appreciate it. $2. Thanks so much. And also wanted to bring this up. Somebody said that Leslie, Trump and Carney business ties go back years, and Trump wanted Carney to win. You think there's truth to that?
there's been a lot of reporting on that, and something to do with Trump's son, where Brookfield, which is the company that Mark Carney used to be the chair of, kind of bailed out Trump's son. But I don't know if this is like a conspiracy. To be honest, I haven't fully looked into it to confirm if it was a conspiracy or not.
Well, it's
So
on my
I
radar
don't.
now. I'll keep my ears
Yeah,
open.
yeah. Have a look. Have a look. Not his son Barron. What's the other names of his sons?
Don Jr., Eric.
Might have been Eric, or it might have been the husband of one of his daughters. I can't remember.
Kushner.
Is some of the Jared Kushner.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'll pull the string and see what I can find.
Yeah,
Then we
see
got
what you can find.
yeah, this question from James. Can she explain what woke her up to leave TDS? As a precinct chair, I'm always looking for insights how to wake up Democrats.
It would have been
Like you
probably.
were saying the media like was lying
Yeah,
about him.
yeah. So remember when they were all going on about him being racist because he called um he used the word coyotes. Do you remember that big scandal, coyotes?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? So they're all saying that he's calling all immigrants coyotes, or like, just like, when I look back into my mind, there was all these things. I'm like, oh, Trump is racist and all of that. And then I'm like, he didn't say that. So I actually went and watched the whole video, and I'm like, wow, he's talking about like the people who are human trafficking, people that are drug smuggling. He's not talking about all Mexicans. So I went and, like, I challenged myself, all of these little things that I believed. I actually went and looked into it, and and listened to the entire thing instead of the bites that the media had. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they're lying about him." And then I went and looked as to what his policies were, and I'm like, "Wow, his policies are phenomenal for people of minority groups, like the Black community." And then
Yeah.
one of the stories that really stood out to me is way back before he was president. This was in New York, and I'm paraphrasing the story because I'm looking at this like a long time ago, so my details might not be like 100%. But there was a story of he had a golf club, and Black people and Jewish people weren't allowed to be part of golf clubs back then. It was when it was
I
still
remember
being
that one.
blocked, right? And he fought to open it to people of color and Jewish people. And he actually had to go to court to fight it, to be able to allow these people into his golf club. To me, that does not look like the behavior of someone who's racist. And then I realized how much we had been lied to. So not only did seeing what they were saying about Trump and twisting and everything wake me up from TDS, it woke me up to look at what is media doing here in Canada. What are they like? I used to hate Harper. Like, I would have Harper syndrome or whatever. Harper deranged syndrome too. I used to hate him. I used to think he was cold, heartless, didn't give a two cents about any Canadian, because that's what the the media brainwashed me to believe. And then so I started looking into these things. I'm like, oh, and I still don't think Harper was perfect. I still don't think Trump is perfect either. But I do
Yeah.
think he's perfect for the situation now with America. So
Yeah.
uh,
Never going to get
a few,
perfection, but it's like if you have one thing that sets you off, and there's, 35-40% of the country here is just stuck in that mentality. It's
you know what someone
easy.
should do? I've been wanting to do it. Is all those like taglines of that they twisted. If somebody was to do a video of what the media is saying plastered everywhere, and then do the video of what he actually said and did a list of a bunch of them, like 20 of them in a row in a video, that would likely go viral. And that would be something people could send. So it would make them question, okay, if I believe this, what does this actually mean?
Yeah, Scott Adams was keeping a list of his hoaxes, of all the Trump hoaxes. Um,
A good
and there are
video
many
would
of
be
them.
really awesome.
Yeah. Uh, Final question I'll put up real quick. How many Canadians want to join the US? And that's going to be our segue to, let me start with this. This is where I think I want to start. This is Unified Grassroots. It's an
Mhm.
organization in Canada, focused on, let's go to the mission, um, where we're
If you go down,
modest
it lists all
gathering.
the things we fight
Yeah.
for.
The principles of United Grassroots: holding government accountable, liberty and personal freedom. Good stuff. And Nadine is the leader of this organization. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I'm springing this on you because I found this. CBC. We're not interested in separation. Saskatchewan government responds to sovereignty petition. And I don't know if we can trust the number of signatures that they say or not, but a petition calling for provincial referendum on Saskatchewan sovereignty has garnered nearly 2,000 signatures in 3 days, prompting responses from both the provincial government and the opposition NDP. The petition, launched by advocacy group United Grassroots on May 2nd, aims to empower the provincial government to negotiate new terms for Saskatchewan's relationship, whether as part of Canada or as an independent nation. So it seems like you've been busy. Tell us
Yeah.
about what's going on.
So what happened is so we've been on the stage in provincially for a while. We probably have, I always say, over 80,000 members and followers, but that's probably increased to almost 100,000 now if we include all of our platform. And they're mostly a lot of those people are in Saskatchewan. So when we get involved in things, we become very effective because we're like a grassroots led. We just try to encourage people to one, run for office. We send volunteers towards candidates that have similar values. We don't send financial donations or anything, but we really get involved in nomination races, which is like the primaries that you guys have in Canada. I'm going to say this because Americans, I think, are always shocked. Our primaries, we get less than 1% of the population vote in them. So you can literally have like a couple hundred people
I
determine
just
who
laughed at that.
the next leader will be or candidate will be. So we kind of do democratic education. We've done like training sessions for people who were running, not just at the provincial level, but at the municipal level. I mean, we invited all the provincial level people, but they it was during an election, so they weren't able to make it. But we had a lot of people running for civic, like city, towns, RMs and stuff. And then school boards. We ran 30 candidates for school board, 25 of them got elected. So super phenomenal stuff. So that's what we were doing before. Now, we're a huge advocate of the people having a voice. And even when the media is trying to say that that's not a popular voice, you shouldn't have it, we push for people having a voice. So when this election happened, I think a lot of us were hoping it was going to go a different direction where we might get better representation, better legislation that's in our favor. You got to understand the West is very different than the East. So if you were to compare like Texas to California, that would be the comparison when it comes to policies and stuff. And the liberals have like stifled so many of our industries. Oil and gas affected negatively our farming. Just a classic example of benefiting the East at the detriment of the West would be Canada putting tariffs on China's electric vehicle, and China retaliated by saying we're going to put 100% tariff on canola, which our entire farming industry is decimated by that, like billions and billions of dollars. Farmers are like, it's costing more to produce than what they can sell it for right
Oof.
now. So this has been happening for a long time. Every time liberal are in power, it happened with Trudeau. It happened when his dad was in power back whatever how many years ago. And so people are fed up. A lot of industries are not coming to Canada, not coming to Saskatchewan and Alberta because of all the policies, the left-leaning policies that are being the globalist policies, the net zero, the attack on oil and gas, just everything. Even now, the fertilizer, they want to attack how much fertilizer farmers can use. Same thing you're seeing in Europe. So when the election result happened, we knew there was going to be a groundswell of people like pissed off. And like I said, by the time it came to us, our polling closing, the election was already decided. It's decided by the East. We don't have fair representation in the Senate or even with seats. Alberta is even worse. And so when the election happened, our organization, we came back and we all felt really grim. And we are the biggest organization in Saskatchewan, and we talked about, are we going to move on this? And we decided we would. We want to see how many people are upset, how many people want independence. Now we polled our organization, and this polling doesn't reflect the exact direction we're going, but we did poll our organization just in our Facebook group, as well on my personal Facebook, as well on Twitter, and the results were pretty much the same on all of them. And we asked if for Saskatchewan, and I was shocked by these numbers. 8% wanted to stay within Canada. 67 or 66% wanting to separate and join the US,
Huh.
and about 24%, whatever the leftover is, wanted to separate and form its own country. So
Interesting.
I can probably bring up the screenshots, or I can bring up the poll. So that's what 90% of our organization wanted, some form of separation from Ottawa.
That's wow. That's angry.
So
That's high level of anger. I want
yeah,
to point
that's
out
our
to people who might not.
organization. So
Yeah.
that's not the full province. Our organization, we were founded during COVID. So it's a lot of really freedom-minded people that don't want government intrusion. So I think they see the American Constitution as more solid than ours. Ours was kind of meaningless. So that could be why it slanted more to join the US. That's not necessarily the direction our organization is going right now. We're trying to take a balanced approach to this. And separation is, yes, on the table, but we're going to try every avenue to influence change before it leads to separation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you would. That's the
Yeah.
pragmatic approach. I think it makes a lot of sense. I wanted to point out to everybody, though, that Saskatchewan has a really big footprint, but it's only got a population of like 1.3
Mhm.
million people. And when you say that you have tens of thousands of people in Saskatchewan, that means you have a large portion
Mhm.
of the population as part of your group. And famously, we know that like it takes a very small percent of disagreeable leaders in order to affect change, because 3% in America, that's the number of people that actually wanted a revolution. And so this is really powerful stuff. Now,
Mhm.
and I also want to point out too, I ran some stats. What blows my mind too is that, okay, it's a lot more rural of an area, but it has a higher per capita GDP by far than like Ontario and Quebec, like
Mhm.
massively. So this is a very wealthy area, a very um, a place that Canada probably wants to keep, right? And a
Mhm.
place that also America would probably love to support, whether that means as a 51st state or just undermining Canada, right, by supporting you guys. So,
So
um, So the
just
level
to
of possibility here is high.
just to explain, like our biggest industry is farming, um, potash mines, so fertilizer. We have uh, one of the biggest uranium deposit than the rest of the world. We have a lot of rare minerals in Saskatchewan. There's also the forest industry. So we have a lot of very high value resources that we export out. Now, the key thing is a lot of this is exported out. So when federal government puts policy that affects that, it affects us huge. And it's similar with Alberta. Alberta's even more oil and gas. We have oil and gas as well. A lot of people don't know Saskatchewan has a huge amount of oil and gas, but Alberta, theirs is heavy oil and gas. So it's kind of known as the oil and gas province. So when you think about, and most of the stuff we have goes to the US. So
Yeah.
when you have politicians in Ottawa trying to talk down and insult the US and say our relationship with the US is over, that really negatively affects Saskatchewan and Alberta. And we're like, no, our relationship is not over. Can you stop saying that? Stop talking for us. And we want to talk for ourselves. And that's where Danielle Smith has kind of led the way. She's Alberta. I wish Scott Moe has our premier Scott Moe. I wish he had done a little bit more of that, but he's not doing it enough. I think again, he's one of those conservatives that are afraid of moving ahead versus Danielle Smith is not.
So tell me how the petition is going, and with all these levers moving, like I
Mhm.
said, it feels like there's a high possibility. Has there been a big uptake?
Yeah, so I'm just looking. It's a bit misleading because if you go on a petition page, right now it says 3,200 signatures. We're we're meeting with an IT team later on about amending some of the things because a lot of people they're when they're signing up, when you first come onto our page, there's like a video that introduces who we are, and then you can sign up there. So a lot of people are just signing up directly to our website and not on the petition. So we actually
Right.
have way more than 3,200. If we count everyone who signed up, is probably closer to 6,000. And like I said, we have several hundreds, probably like 100,000 people, but it's really hard to reach to all of those people with algorithms and stuff. So, and again, our group was not like a separatist group per se all this time. And even now, like that's not the main goal. It's we're willing to go there. We will go there if we have to, if that's what's going to be best for us. So
Well, I
we
mean, we're
just
talking about
now,
less than a week. It's been live.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
yeah. So
there's another signature out, like a petition out there that a gentleman placed, and I think that one was up to 6,000 signatures, and we're working together to kind of amalgamate both and see. In order for us to have a vote put to the public, which is called, we don't have a referendum option here in Saskatchewan, Alberta does. We have what's called a plebiscite. Most people don't even know what that word means. So, but a plebiscite is basically a vote that will be put to the public that they have to vote on. You need a certain percentage of the population to vote, and then it's a certain percentage for things to be considered. But it's non-binding. You can do that, and the government can choose to do nothing. A referendum,
well,
they have to act on it.
got it.
So most of our efforts is, and I know this is dry information, but you've got really smart listeners, so they'll be able to follow. Most of our
This is
efforts will be
exciting. This is like history changing stuff.
mhm. And most of our efforts will be in changing the legislation, pressuring current government to have a citizen-led referendum option. So, but the funny thing is the NDP, the left-leaning party that sided with Liberal all this time, that have the same policies basically as the Liberal who have been destroying our province, they're trying to put they have actually tabled legislation to change it so we can't do a plebiscite for a referendum for one, that we need more signatures than what the current requirement is 15%. So they're saying they're going to double that to 30%. And And I think they want to make it so the provincial government can't themselves issue a referendum, because right now that's what Alberta is basically saying they're going to do to a certain extent. So they're trying to make it so that's illegal. They're basically trying to shut us down.
Well, let's
So
wait. Let's wait on Alberta. So I wanted to bring this
mhm.
up. Saskatchewan NDP pushes Mo. Explain to us what's going on here. Is this the right thing to be looking at, Nadine?
Yeah, so that was when it first started. So in the Legislative Assembly, the NDP kept saying, "Are you a separatist party? Are you a separatist party?" And they're wanting Scott Moe to shut us down. I don't know, like what, like freeze our bank accounts or like shut down our website. I don't know. Like our petition right now is not even for the plebiscite. It's just gathering all of the people who want separation and then activating them later on when we have the petition ready. And but I don't know. NDP has a I tend to trigger the NDP. This is not new. They've come attacked our organization during COVID, during the parental rights stuff. We just trigger them because we are anti woke. And so this is just another example. So they spent like 30 minutes in the SAS legislature arguing back and forth. I sent you the link. It's on my Twitter if you want to watch it. It's quite entertaining. Um, and the SAS government, Scott Moe is saying, we're not going to take away the voice of the people. And he also pointed out that this plebiscite and referendum legislation was put in place by the NDP themselves. And it's kind of what makes this even more funny. The last people to talk about referendum and separation was actually the last leader the NDP had actually studied the benefits of Saskatchewan joining the US. This was like 20 some years ago. The NDP was the last one to do that. So it's kind of ironic in a way that now they're trying to stop it when they were initially the ones who pushed it way back when.
You gotta love the establishment, man. Once they get in, right, they get comfortable, and so I like this. I just want to like reemphasize to everybody how big a deal this is. Not a large province, but a
Mhm.
financially important province to the rest of Canada. I watched. I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Rudyard Lynch. Nadine, have you heard that?
No.
He's a YouTuber and he puts out really good content. He's a historian, and he had a really good video entitled, I think it was "How Canada Falls Apart," and he made a lot of really informative things in there. Helped me learn really the whole context, which is, well, Quebec has never really been a very firm part of Canada. Canada has essentially bought it off multiple times. Canada doesn't have the same type of national unity that America does, and that the age demographics and the situation where it is with government spending is all more advanced and metastasized than the US. And he predicted a Saskatchewan and Alberta secession as one of the possible paths that places that this would go down. And one of it is because of how much financial support Alberta and Saskatchewan give to the rest of Canada at large. And what he painted a picture of is that Ontario is going to be aging, full of immigrants, not like a tax burden, and that all of the resource money was going to be essentially funneled to subsidize those, and that it was only a matter of time, like writing on the wall, until there were real secession movements. So now, again, you could say that you're not a secession movement, and I think you're right. But the fact that you've gotten a few thousand signatures and all of a sudden you have like premiers freaking out about it, like that's a big deal. That's a really big deal.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And they're not just freaking out about it. They're trying to put legislation, like the left is, the NDP is trying to put legislation to stop it. But it's kind of funny. They're called the New Democratic Party, and they're about imagine taking the voice away from the people. It's the opposite of democracy.
All right.
So I just kind of find it ironic, but we're going to keep going, and we've got a really strong board. It's funny, they were trying to paint me in the ledge. If you end up watching that video, they're calling me like extreme fringe right wing. The same party called me right wing wacko in the past, and I'm thinking I used to vote left. Like I voted liberal, in 2015. Like my whole life I was a lefty. To paint me or our organization as like extremists. Yeah, we have teacher on our board. We have two engineers, soon to be three. We have another engineer joining our board, like a financial advisor, some farmer, a project manager, like business owners in Saskatchewan. Like we're like just normal everyday like people. And so to get ahead of it, I started releasing these press release. And if you read the articles, the mainstream media has actually reported somewhat fairly on this. They've actually grabbed some of our quotes, and they haven't pushed the narratives that they have in the past with our organization. So I think we definitely learned something important in this, is get ahead of them defining you, so that you can define yourself in the movement first, so that it
Yeah, I've
doesn't
seen you putting these out,
lose.
and they're great.
Yeah.
You've put out a couple now as this is developed. This is so. Is this what you want to look at? Saskatchewan NTP is introducing bill to change referendum legislation,
Yeah, if you wanna
essentially.
play that video, it's like an hour and 30 not a minute and 30 seconds. It kinda explains the rationale for it.
Sure, let's go.
The Keep Saskatchewan in Canada Act.
While Alberta Premier Danielle Smith appears to be opening the door to an independence referendum, Saskatchewan opposition leader Carla Beck is hoping to slam it shut by introducing new legislation.
It stops the Premier and Cabinet from calling a separation referendum without a clear mandate from Saskatchewan voters. It also raises the threshold for citizen petitions on separation specifically.
The magic number of signatures needed is currently at least 15% of eligible voters. The NDP wants to double it.
And we certainly didn't want to do what we saw them do in Alberta, which was grease the wheels, basically.
Beck says this bill would create more certainty for investment in Saskatchewan and focusing on generational projects. In recent days, the Premier has not said anything about following in Alberta's footsteps to make our referendum legislation easier, even taking it one step further on Tuesday.
I would vote for a strong and united Canada any day and every day, and Saskatchewan to be part of that.
Mo is accusing the NDP of trying to change the democratic process, something he won't support. He also says he believes it'll never get to a point where there will need to be a vote to separate from Canada. Catherine Ludwig, Global News.
Fascinating stuff.
It's gonna be interesting too, because if you go based on the polling that has occurred, Saskatchewan's actually the highest sentiment for separation. The last poll that was done just a few months ago was, if Mark Carney wins, do you want separation, basically, and 34% of the population did. So that 15% to reach is not, it's not going to be that difficult. So, and that's the thing. If you know how the democratic processes work in our province, all it takes is for people to get more involved in either party. Like, we have the numbers. If the people were willing to show up at the conventions, like, we have the numbers to take over both NDP and SAS party. So it's kind of comical. If they're going to try to push back, we're just going to organize better, and we're going to show up at the NDP leadership and boot out the current leader and get everyone to elect a new NDP leader, or do the same with SAS party. Like, if you look at how democracy work in Saskatchewan, if the people actually knew the power that they have, we can we can literally change every government official. So
I wonder what your election interference laws are like. Maybe Elon can just come in and give out thousands of dollars to people to come vote. Maybe that's all it will take.
no, we do have some solid laws for funding and stuff for election. Again, we didn't get involved with any funding. In fact, we don't have very much funding at all. It's all volunteer based. I don't get paid to run this organization or do any of this. So, but there are rules in Saskatchewan, but I don't think there's rule. I think they can get funding provincially for outside of the province. I don't know if it's outside of the country, but I want to state something that she said I think it's completely untrue. She's saying people are not coming in here to invest in Saskatchewan because of the separation or separatist sentiment. And I think it's actually the opposite effect. People are not settling here because they know the direction Canada is going. If you look at capital investment into Canada, it's gone way down. The amount of farmers and people that I know that own businesses that are at the point, if this doesn't succeed, they're going to sell off everything and move to the US and settle in the US, is unheard of. Like, I hear from different business owners every single day. And I
Yeah.
will say, my husband and I, my husband being a family doctor, we've considered ourselves relocating and moving to the US. And him being a doctor makes it a little bit easier. But like, if we've considered that just for better opportunity because we think Canada's going to crash, how many more people are doing the exact same thing? And
Yeah. Oh, the
Trump made
value of all the assets go up if it's part of America. It's just it happens. There will be more investment. There will be less trade friction. It makes a ton of sense, and these numbers are real. So, like, one of the things that we wanted to talk about and look about here is, okay, Angus Reid. I don't know too much about them, and the numbers I've seen have been, they make sense, but
Mhm,
we don't think we're seeing the whole picture here, because this question says become its own independent country. It's not about joining America.
mhm,
Those are two separate things that probably should have been asked independently. And
mhm.
even yet, these numbers are high, like really high. And then also, they actually did it again in 2019. And this has been cherry picked to show that the numbers going down, when in reality, as we know, the media loves to cherry pick polls in a way that misrepresents reality.
Yeah,
The number here was 53%. So a majority of Saskatchewan was at least
yeah,
moderately in favor of joining a Western separatist movement. So these are two, like, apples and oranges. And so we
yeah.
really don't know what public opinion now is at all, but obviously it's probably going up.
And when you ask the question, "Are you in favor or are you not?" It kind of takes away the moderately in favor, right? Those people that with a proper campaign done throughout the province would probably go into the yes category. So it's funny, in 2019, it was all these different categories, but now it's just one or the other. So I would like to see a poll done where it asks that type of question,
We
where
want
in
this
favor,
exact
not,
question over again is the right way to do it.
yeah.
The exact same wording, exact same. And the fact that they didn't do it this way, in my opinion, is a big miss for them. Like, they need a rap on the knuckles with the ruler. Bad job, Angus Reid, because they should have known that this would have been cherry picked, and maybe they were.
Yeah.
This is what they wanted. I don't know. Like Alberta, really high too. That's a 60% number from Alberta.
And like that's one thing I really would like to see right now. And I've asked, we would like to commission such a poll ourselves. Like, you can pay a company to do it. We just don't have the funds yet. But maybe if the people watching this who are from Saskatchewan want to support a really good poll, I think it would really give the government the guts to, especially if the sentiment is higher than not, to move on potentially doing a referendum option that's citizen led. So, but yeah. Oh, someone in the comments said Preston Manning, I think, is doing some polling. Preston Manning is the someone that used to be the leader of the Conservative Party
Yeah.
federally. I'm going to reach out. Um, I've reached out to him. I was talking to him a couple weeks ago before we moved on this, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the current data is. And again, I don't think it's smart for Sask government right now to move on things like drastically until we see what Mark Carney's going to do. We know what his values are, what he's been pushing his whole life, but we don't know what policy he's going to put in place. And they can't act until that starts happening. I think the public sentiment will start moving more towards separatism when you start seeing policies enacted by the current prime
Hmm.
minister that affects us negatively. So I understand they can't really act yet. So it might be one of those things where we're going to slowly gain momentum until something big happens. And then boom, all the people are on the same page as us. They want out.
Well, personally, I would advise you to strike while the iron is hot. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in America might take notice too. Because as we've said, this has just been stunning week of how
Mhm.
much freak out there is in the actual seat of government in your province. Now, let me ask you about Alberta. Where are they at?
They've gathered all the signatures they need. I think they needed 170,000. They gathered 230 so far. So
Oh, wow.
so they didn't gather the signatures for the petition, but they gathered all the people willing to sign it. But Alberta, I think, moved further ahead. They had an organization that had been doing groundwork for the last 4 years already. We are just starting, so we didn't have what they had, and they also have a lot of really loud conservative voices that have a lot of following in Alberta versus in Saskatchewan. There's not many. Like, I can think of myself maybe being one of the only ones. So, which there
Yeah.
might be more, but I don't know if they're for separatism. So,
So they're
yeah,
moderately bigger. They're
they're
what, like 4
4.5
times bigger?
million. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got about 5% of the population who says they're ready to sign. That's a big deal. Now, do you have a analog over there that you meet or discuss with? Like, who are the 50, or we have, who are the nonprofits in Alberta that are leading this push? Or is it political
Alberta
leaders?
Prosperity Project is the main one. They have a few. They had one that merged with them that was Alberta Pension. Oh, I can't remember the name. Anyways, they merged with Alberta Prosperity Project. So they were kind of doing a lot of the groundwork of what it would look like if Alberta was to become its own country. In Saskatchewan, we don't have that. We have like a new think tank that started, Saskatchewan Institute. So we're going to be working with them on doing the groundwork research to answer the questions that people would have, the concerns. What would our pension look like? What would like one of the biggest topic of conversation as well? How would it work with the First Nations people? So we have like treaties that the government currently pays for the Aboriginal First Nation people in Saskatchewan. So what would that look like if there was a separation to occur? Many are saying that it can't happen because of the treaty, but that's just not what the treaty says if you read them. But there's a lot of that information kind of being pushed out there to try to stop the momentum, stop it from occurring. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I don't think our organization will be the one doing all of that. I think we're going to have to work with some in Saskatchewan, but also the Alberta groups there because they're kind of way ahead of it. So, but it'd be great to keep working on gathering the signatures. I mean, if we count both the signed petition and the people who just signed up on our website, not realizing it wasn't the same, we're probably close to 6,000 in the matter of a few days. I think it went live maybe on Monday, I think. So,
Yeah, that's great.
and the more, and I'll be honest, I'm so thankful the NDP is making such a stink of this because we're getting we're getting news coverage, so more people are knowing about an organization that's doing something that's trying to kind of influence change. So hopefully they'll keep talking about us and making us think about this.
It's cool stuff. And again, the amount of historic change. I mean, listen, like we have this whole trend of Western governments who are just totally willing to trample on people's rights to maintain the status quo. It's happening in America. It's happening in Europe and England, and it looks like they're going to try it in Saskatchewan too. And that's not the right thing. It's like if people are upset with the status quo, you don't double down. You don't make things
Mhm.
worse. You don't take away their voice. And they're so transparent and stupid. And good on them that they're helping you. Now, let
It's
me
going
ask
to
you this.
backfire.
Yeah. Well, so we've been talking about this a long time, and I've run up against a hard stop. Now, let me ask you, admittedly, that this is a 95% U.S. audience right now. But how can they help you?
Well, maybe if we get on Joe Rogan.
I can't get on Joe Rogan, so I can't get you on.
That
Joe
would be it.
Rogan's producer, if you're watching this for some insane reason,
I
please.
I also want to add, Alberta did send a delegate to DC to look into potentially if the Trump team was interested in Alberta. And like through the grapevine, I heard that that wasn't the sentiment. And in Alberta, the sentiment for joining the US is much less than becoming its own country. And I think in Saskatchewan, even though our organization is very for it, as in the members, that doesn't mean the general population is. We don't want to go from Ottawa dictating what we're doing to DC now dictating what we're doing. And maybe some would be in favor with Trump in power, but what if Kamala or a far lefty does get in power? And
Yeah.
does something to destroy. So I think we're kind of more moving. Let's become independent, but have a better, stronger relationship with the US than is capable right now because of Ottawa. So, but
Yeah.
how can you help? Maybe help spread the message that if all of media was to be talking in the US about Alberta and Saskatchewan looking at separating, that would be great. So, because it'll
Well,
build more
also,
momentum, pressure for change.
at the very least, follow Nadine G. Ness on Twitter. And you're right, it should be independent first, right? Like
Mhm.
that's the way it should work. And you never know what happens. But if you gain complete independence, then obviously you're going to have better relationships with the United States. And it all, if you come into the United States, is about how and when, as you astutely pointed out.
Mhm.
If you come in the right way to do it, is for both of your provinces to be individual states, the 51st and 52nd, so that you increase the number of conservative senators by 4, and then you won't have to worry about Kamala Harris. That's probably the right way to do it, right?
And I want to state too, like Saskatchewan and Alberta, even though all of Canada as a whole is left leaning, Saskatchewan and Alberta is predominantly right leaning. In the times where it didn't go right leaning is because there was a split in the conservative vote. So, but the majority of the provinces are conservatives, both Alberta and Saskatchewan. So you're right. It wouldn't be one of those um like swing state. It would likely be a for sure like red state in
Yeah.
if it was to occur. So, but yeah, you had polled a while ago on the
Yes,
sentiment, and those numbers were shocking.
they were indeed.
Do you have them?
Oh man, I gotta log back in. Yeah, I have them right here. And then we got a break. I'm going on
The
Brianna Morella's show and
Oh,
like,
let's go. We'll talk about it next time, but
why is
the
it doing
gist of
this?
it, people didn't think Trudeau was that bad for us, which was shocking.
Yeah.
And
Well, they don't know. They
and
have no idea.
and the majority of Americans were on board with Saskatchewan and Alberta joining.
Yeah, Trudeau had a really good favorability rating. Weird. Only what is that? 32% unfavorable. He's been good for Canada, 33 to 27. But I mean, this was the big one. 50% of voters would support having Canadian provinces who wanted to secede become part of the U.S. And it was 68% of Republicans. And the Democrats
Yeah.
did not want it. Imagine that.
Oh.
Well, thanks again for being here. And like, if you find out more about that polling, listen, I would do it too, but I've never polled Canada. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a really hard poll to do. Probably need somebody that really knows, how things go on the ground, or work with an existing research organization within Saskatchewan. Otherwise, I would do it myself. But yeah, we'll have to have you back on to discuss it and tell us if there's anything you can do. Everybody go follow Nadine G. Ness on Twitter, and good luck getting all those signatures.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna keep working. I'm a determined person. I don't believe in can't. So we'll see.
Well, you built the biggest conservative grassroots organization in Saskatchewan. Sky's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Thank you so
All right.
much for having me on.